Hi, everybody. How are you? Thanks for coming on to Community Conversations. Let me know that you're here in the chat. Drop a note, say hi. We'll get started soon. I know I got big shoes to fill with Ethan's absence, but we'll definitely get to a lot of questions, and I'm looking forward to seeing everybody. Just a general, announcement and reminder that this live stream is educational purposes and not intended to replace therapy. For treatment related questions, definitely please work with your provider or contact a local clinician. You can also use the IOCDF's online resource directory at iocdf.org/find-help to locate a trained clinician near you. The IOCDF is not a crisis hotline. If you are in a crisis, please, if you are ever feeling suicidal or unsafe, please go to your local emergency room or call 911 or the suicide prevention hotline at 800-273-8255. We want to make sure that everybody knows that this is a safe space. Be kind and respectful to everyone, as we always know we are. At the end of the day, this is a chance for all of us to support one another, and it's a amazing community we have, and we want to keep it that way, just supporting one another. Long Island, New York. I was just there on Sunday. I was in Belmore. Hey, Grace, how are you? Katie, how are you? Dave, hope you're doing well. Glad to see everybody here. Mike, good to see you. Good evening. Dublin, Ireland, Minnesota, Texas. We got all the stops. I love it. So happy to have everybody here today. To keep telling me where you're coming from, where you're tuning in from. Again, I'm filling in for Ethan. I'm really excited to be here for this community conversation special edition, and we're going to rattle off some questions. And if you have a question, please definitely ask it in the chat. Ask away. I'm an open book, and I know we're trying to create this community that we're answering your questions and getting to what you need. So definitely feel free to ask questions. There was a couple questions left over from the last live stream that I really would like to get to. And someone asked, what gaps do you still see in the world of OCD and mental health advocacy? That was a big question for me to think about when I saw that. I think the lack of the diversity is definitely something that I know. With anxiety in athletes, I want more athletes of different backgrounds, ethnicity, and races and religions to come forward and start telling their story and feel supported. I think that definitely is something that we're trying to work on a lot. And I think the more different perspectives and backgrounds we can get is really, really important to the world of OCD and mental health advocacy in general. But in terms of gaps, I think, obviously there's still a gap where people aren't being treated as soon as they need to be. I know for myself, I was 15 when I was diagnosed, but I definitely was pretty in rough shape before that. And luckily, I did get treatment when I was 16. But for a lot of people, treatment doesn't come until 10 years after they're diagnosed, or they don't get diagnosed nearly as soon as they need to. So I think that's definitely the biggest gap is that we're trying to, really try to build upon, is make sure that we really want to get people diagnosed and into treatment sooner than they're getting into treatment right now. How did everybody enjoy the conference? If you were in the conference, let me know. I had a great time. I thought being in person was so huge for our community. I haven't seen so many people that we've been working with, behind the scenes for so long, and seeing them in person. It was really emotional, and I know, it's like drinking from a fire hose with all the information that you always get at the conference. But it's such a special place, and to be in a community that's so close and tight knit as ours is truly, a credit to you guys, and a credit to the IFCDF and what we've built. And it's really, really remarkable to have a community that's this tight knit and this supportive. Jeff, I didn't see you at the conference. I don't know. I'm going to get to some of these questions. Beth Cariucci, thanks for sharing your story. Been hiding from the pandemic for 2 years, 4 months. Didn't go anywhere. I totally hear you. That's extremely challenging, and I can't imagine. I personally don't have contamination OCD, but I know so many people that do, and I can't imagine having contamination OCD in a situation like that pandemic. And I hope you're receiving the help that you need, and are continuing to push through, because we're all here for you. And I think contamination, issues can pop up, especially in such a situation like that. I know one obsession that I was having when I was going through the pandemic, it wasn't the actual contamination of myself, but I was really, really worried of contaminating my grandmother at the time, who had brain cancer, and my parents. So coming home from grad school, where I was working in the weight room with so many athletes, I was so concerned with not getting my parents, sick, or bringing home COVID to them. So I mean, maybe contamination in the sense of harming another person with the contamination. That was what I dealt with, and that pandemic really challenged us all. I think that was something that really maybe challenged our community a lot, but also brought us closer together. And I think I saw that at the conference, that the amount of people that were talking about how much that pandemic had to bring us together. So just a little update on what we're doing with anxiety in athletes. So as you know, I helped co-found the Anxiety in Athletes initiative when I became a lead advocate. And so we created an online resource center that was modeled after anxiety in the classroom. And our task force with anxiety in athletes is working really hard to pump out content on that website for if you're an athlete, if you're a parent, if you're a coach, and a person in administration, any of those three, and beyond. We're really trying to make sure that there's enough resources for people to break down the wall of stigma in athletics, because as many of you know my story, I was discriminated against and belittled because of my OCD and my mental health during college. So it was very dear and near to my heart to make sure that nobody else is being bullied and that wall of stigma is really broken down. So, in sports, it's very prominent, but it was less talked about, and we noticed that there really was a community there that needed that help. And I'm really, really excited. Some notable people in our task force. We have a judo champion from Canada, and Kevin Anderson, who was number 5 in the world in his sport, tennis superstar, and a lot of good coaches, a lot of good clinicians involved. And so we have a lot of good people in the right place, and I'm really excited with how we're moving forward. And so just like Jeff said, we're very close to partnering with Team USA Weightlifting. So that was really, really exciting. And I'm looking forward to seeing those athletes be supported and have a platform to share their story. So we have some really, really good things in the works. We're going to Flushing, New York this September to help volunteer at a charity tennis tournament called the Matt Stevenson Tennis Tournament for mental health. It's a United States Tennis Association Junior National Tennis Tournament, and we'll have a table there for anxiety and athletes representing the IFCDF. So I'm really, really excited for that. And, we're really trending in the right direction. And if you haven't checked out our YouTube series and our live stream, I know this is a huge self-plug of anxiety and athletes, but I definitely want to make sure people know all the great things we're doing. If you haven't checked out our YouTube series, we're releasing more and more videos of interviews with athletes, former athletes, clinicians, coaches, you name it. And we're trying to really break down that wall. And we'd love to hear about more topics that you guys would like to hear about related to sport. So if you have anything that you're interested in hearing about more, definitely let us know, and reach out to me, because I'd love to answer more questions on those. Grace, you have a really good question with advice in regards to getting more support, seeking a higher level of treatment when school and work schedules don't really allow for it. I totally, I hear that. I think a big thing for me, because I went through treatment through school, we definitely need to recognize that our timeline is our timeline, and our journey is so unique to our own. And so rather than focusing on, whether you're going to graduate on time or, all right, that you already pay for tuition. So that definitely, I understand that, you have paid for tuition, and, you might not be able to do IOP, but maybe stick with intensive. And then when you get past that college semester, look for an IOP so that you're, before you pay for tuition, because it really can be helpful. And I think that would be beneficial for anybody that thinks it would be beneficial for them. I know I didn't go to, I went to outpatient, but I think, inpatient, outpatient, whatever it is, I think treatment is treatment. And I think ERP for me is a gold standard. And I think it really does change the way, OCD operates. Breaking that anxious cycle is definitely really, really, really huge. So I totally get the time management piece is so hard. Like, I always thought about how so many students and athletes that I was working with were having so much trouble with just school and sports. And I was like, guys, could you imagine like doing ERP on top of this? Like, that's what we were doing, and doing ERP on top of, school and sports and having a job is so hard. So really, I mean, it's going to teach you a lot of lessons on time management, but I would say put the ERP at the forefront of your priorities, especially if you feel like you need that higher level of treatment. I think sometimes I fall back into, I can kind of put it on the back burner, and that's when I kind of start falling into that OCD cycle again. And just making sure that it's at the top of your priorities, I think, is really, really huge. Katie Rothfelder, it was you and Jeff. I don't know. It's a tie. Laura, you can definitely see Jeff's comment. I'm so sorry you're going through that and really going through such a tough time. Definitely reach out to info@iocdf.org for more resources and more information. I think there's so much out there that we've put out there at the IOCDF that could really help you. You can find the YouTube links for the athlete interviews on the IOCDF YouTube page under the Anxiety and Athletes playlist. Oh, Skyla's the best behind the scenes. She already put the link in the chat, so you can see the link in the chat. I don't think our tech team gets enough credit. They're always on top of it. Caitlin, you had a good question. How do you deal with OCD when you're constantly triggered, but by just looking at things and ordering and arranging OCD? I think the constant triggering is definitely really tough. I know for me now, having gone through treatment, I still have constant intrusive thoughts. But what I really rely on is something that Katie O'Dunn always, one of our other lead advocates, her big mantra is really live into your values, and that's what I kind of always make sure to remind myself is living into my values, and is this going to bring me closer to my values? Is that obsession that I'm dealing with going to bring me closer to my values? And that's been a really big part of what I've been trying to remind myself of when I actually face that crippling anxiety that we still face even after going through treatment. I think, and then also making sure that maintenance work with ERP. I'm sure on these live streams you hear ERP all the time, you hear ERP all the time, but it's so important that to keep up with ERP and understand that it's so amazing, because as debilitating and tough as OCD can be and how hard ERP therapy can be, it really does change the way the OCD cycle works in your mind, and definitely can stick with the ick from Katie O'Dunn. Yes, I love, she has the best things. She's so catchy and creative. Like all her Instagram posts, I'm like, how do I get like that? It's amazing. I'm really sorry to hear that, Caitlin, that your ERP therapist gave up on you. I'd like to find that therapist and give me their address. Just kidding. But seriously, I hope you know that you're so worthy of treatment, and that if you feel like they gave up on you, then it just means it wasn't the right fit, and you're going to find the right fit and you're going to thrive. Like, don't give up on treatment because of one ERP therapist. I went through 3 therapists before I found the one I've been with for 7 years. So please know that you're so worthy of living of living such a fulfilled life, and a life that's more than functional. We don't want to survive; we want to thrive, right? And so, make sure you seek another therapist. Check out the IOCDF and their resource directory. I'll put it again: iocdf.org/find help. You can locate another trained clinician near you. I think that is so important to remember, is that if you feel like an ERP therapist gave up on you, it's not you. It's never you. You're so worthy of treatment, and I know that you're going to pull through and find the right fit for you. work towards living a value-driven life. Yep. Grace had a question regarding ERP. How terrible should an exposure be? I know there's an ideal SUDS range for different exposures based on one's ERP hierarchy, but I feel like no matter how long I might rate an exposure beforehand, the exposure is always really kind of terrible when I'm in the middle of the actual exposure. For example, I might rate an exposure ahead of time as a 30 out of 100, but then I go and do the exposure only to find out that it's like a 60 out of 100. That's a good question. And it's tough because you're right. There really is no way to like guarantee that that's going to be a 30 or, my therapist used like out of 10. So if it was like a 3 out of 10, there's no way there to really guarantee that that was definitely going to be a 3. But I think making it that that hierarchy is the most important, and just remembering that doing an exposure alone is a win, right? So I've gotten a lot of questions on our live streams in the past about, how do I do the hardest exposure yet and skip to the hardest one? You can't, because you really need to make sure that you're hitting those small ones to prepare you for that big one, right? So, I use the example of my weightlifting competitions. I don't max out or push the weight every day. I wait for a competition to be prepared for that. So like we want to make sure that we're doing our hierarchy and making sure that there's different ranges of how stressed and anxious we might be. I think it's almost impossible to guarantee, like I said, that that there's a guaranteed way to rate an exposure. I think in your heart a little bit what's going to be tougher and what's not. But the reality is that ERP is really, really anxiety provoking because I mean, think about it. We are doing exactly what we don't want to do, right? We're resisting a compulsion that our mind is telling us to do and we believe we should do. So I think it's definitely hard to rate an exposure, but starting smaller. I know, Grace, we had a great conversation at the conference. It was so good to catch up in person, and I'm really, really proud of the work you're doing with in the gym with your exposures and bringing exposures in, to a place that is supposed to be exposure free. And so attacking that exposure in the gym is, kudos to you. I think that's awesome. Michael, good to see you. I'm so glad that you're here with us. Do you struggle with worrying people are mad at you? OCD is always making me think people are mad at me. Yes, yes, and yes. I think down in my core, I am a people pleaser and I want to make everybody happy. And slowly, I've realized I should never really, I'm never really going to be able to make everybody happy, and that's kind of the reality of life, even without OCD. And so then you add in OCD, and it's like, I think one thing that I've noticed is like texting for me is really tough, because you can't tell tone over text. So that's when my OCD always bugs about people being upset with me, because like if someone like responds with a period at the end of a sentence, it's like, oh gosh, they're mad at me. And I mean, it doesn't mean they are. Like they're just using punctuation. But in my mind, I totally know what you're saying, Michael. I literally am spinning and spinning and spinning, like, oh, like I need to, and then I end up double texting them like, hey, I didn't mean anything by that text, and then they're like, what are you talking about? So I totally understand about struggle with worrying people are mad at me. The more and more I've realized that I'm not gonna be able to make everybody happy, and that one thing that I learned as a strength coach was I can control how I deliver a message, or message meaning, in person, online. but I can't control someone's reaction. And their reaction is going to be their reaction, and I can't control that, unfortunately. So just preparing myself for how I'm going to relay a message and interact with somebody and deliver a message, and then preparing for however they're gonna react to that message, because at the end of the day, I'm not going to be able to control that. Kayla, I totally agree. That was a really good question that I you know hadn't really thought about until someone asked it. And that was my first answer was um, the lack of diagnosis and treatment, because I know it does take a lot of um, it does really take a lot of time to make sure that people are diagnosed and treated. It sounds like we agree on all the gaps that you're saying. Um, lack of understanding in non-U.S. Latin American populations. You know, huge absence of POC among mental health advocates. Those are all things that we have been working on, that are all at the forefront of our mind. I know for me, for anxiety and athletes, and for our group, we're trying to work on getting into more historically Black colleges and universities to make sure that people have support and have a platform to share their experiences, and have that and we break down that wall of stigma of mental health. So I think we are actively closing these gaps, and things take time, unfortunately, and it's not going to Rome wasn't built in one day, and I think we really are getting there with the amount of people we have helping us. What is there was a pre-submitted question that was pretty good. Um, what is the worst piece of OCD advice you have ever received from an OCD specialist? Um, wow. I think I was talking to Skylar about this before. I think when I saw that question, I think the worst OCD advice I got from an OCD specialist was the lack thereof advice. I found that the people I saw before, my clinician that I've been seeing for a long time now, said they specialize in OCD, but weren't actually trained in ERP. So their advice wasn't really beneficial for somebody that was dealing with severe OCD. So that I think would be my biggest you know piece of advice, of worst piece of OCD advice I've ever received, because it was just it was non-existent. Michael, I totally agree about the post-conference blues. I mean, I have said that for like 2 weeks now, 3 weeks now. I keep texting our advocate team and be like, I can't wait a whole nother year to see everybody. It's totally tough, and I I really, really, feel the same way you're feeling. It's so tough to be in an environment. It's amazing to be in an environment like that, but it's so tough to leave that environment and go back to a workplace that doesn't really understand. Go back to a family that doesn't understand. Whatever it is that you're dealing with, and your support around you. There's nothing like the conference. There's so many people that understand what you're going through there. So I really think it is very tough. And I definitely have had those post conference blues. It happens every time, and I just look forward to the next one. Katie, I totally agree. We can definitely get stuck on doing the hard exposure or the right SUDS level. If your therapist invites you to do exposure and your response is it's too hard, the exposure becomes noticing and approaching the feelings that come with rejecting the exposure, and it's too hard. There are always opportunities. I totally agree. I think the hardest exposure is the next one, right? And I think, and the next one is always going to be the hardest because it's the next one you're going to do, and ERP is hard, period. So I think just taking the opportunity to do any exposure that you can do is a win for you against OCD. I'm gonna get some more questions for us. There was a good question that was asked, at one of our other live streams. As a parent of an adult child who has OCD but refuses to seek treatment, do you have any life experience with what things your parents said or did, which helped you in deciding to seek treatment? Sorry, guys, I'm thirsty. I'm never on this on my own. I'm talking way too much. I'm sorry. I think the biggest thing for me is my parents were really, really supportive, and I'm very, very fortunate for that. And I understand that not every family is the same and have that same accessibility to treatment, have those same resources, and have that same support. So I think for people that are refusing treatment, one, sometimes it needs to get to a place where their life isn't the same with OCD and without. And so for me, it got so serious that I was, stuck at home and couldn't really do the things I wanted to do, and it kind of solved itself. But for other people, they think OCD might be helping them because it's stopping that anxiety on the immediate effect and then ending up just putting them in a spiral of that OCD cycle. As we know, it doesn't help. It makes it so much worse. But what parents can do is research, reach out to clinicians themselves. I know my mom, that's what my mom did. And, I know she begged people for treatment. I think that's so, it was so hard for her. And I can't imagine how, what it was like, having to, I doubt she'll say it herself, she would do it all over again. But, having that responsibility to make sure that her child is going to get treatment, and that, at this point it was so hard to find treatment. So she was begging, we did find my therapist that I've been with for a while, she wasn't taking any clients. I know my mom really just was at her last straw, and was just said, listen, he needs it. Like, he can't, like, it's life or death at this point. And so, I think what parents can really do and say is just listen without waiting to reply. Listen to them, to your child and how they're feeling, without thinking of the response before they say what they need to say. And I think that's basic human interaction. I think that's something my parents did really well, is they listened to me and understood what I was saying, and weren't just waiting to reply and problem solve immediately. They were trying to understand OCD and being supportive of whatever treatment I wanted to seek. And I think it's so important to make sure that we're you guys as who are parents, that you're looking at resources on the IOCDF website. You're getting involved with advocacy, because I think there is a large community with parents that don't know where to turn. I know we had some at our advocacy group and at the conference that were really, really interested in advocacy because they want to help their kid. And I think that's so commendable and so important. But I think as far as, doing things or saying things that help me and decide to seek treatment, I think just listening with empathy and trying to research OCD and suggesting things goes a long way. And then once you get them to treatment and they see what ERP can do, I know for me, once I saw a sniff of success with ERP, and it takes a little while, but once I saw what my life was going to be like with control and without OCD, I wanted to keep going to treatment, even though it sucked, right? ERP is it's rough. No one likes doing it, but seeing my life and how much I could accomplish, having 14 hours of the day back from my compulsions made me want to keep going to treatment. So if you can get them there in a place that's a environment that's supportive, it really could go a long way that they start seeing what treatment can do for them. And then another thing my mom and dad and my brother did that was really, really helpful was go to treatment once in a while with me and understand what I was doing. And they were involved in my exposures, because then it really creates when you're outside of treatment and you're at home, it creates a know of everybody and you're one cohesive unit. Um, Good question here. Is it possible to beat OCD completely, or is it a constant struggle? Does it try to find its way back from time to time? Uh, that definitely, you know, one thing we definitely hammered home on one of our presentations at the conference, Liz McInvale always says is um, that we don't want to just have a functional life. Um, OCD is chronic, right? There's no cure necessarily. There's no pill that you're going to take that's going to go away. But your symptoms with ERP, maybe with the combination of ERP and medication, that's what I have. And you know, with the two and some hard work in ERP, you can get your symptoms down so minuscule that you have a life that's so fulfilling and able to do what you want to accomplish, right? And so we want to emphasize that we're not just trying to get past OCD. We're trying to, you know, push OCD down and stomp on it, right? It's not a process that is easy or quick, but it's a process that's worth it. And so I definitely suggest understanding that it's going to try to find its way back from time to time, right? I still do maintenance work all the time in therapy and ERP, but it's so important to beat OCD, and then recognize that we're not only trying to survive, but we're trying to thrive in our situation and live the life that you want to live, that's fulfilling. So I think it's really important to remember that, yeah, there is struggle. There's no doubt. There's pain, there's struggle, and some days are gonna be tougher than others, and some days are gonna be great. But it can get to the point with OCD that you can have a fulfilling life that's wonderful. Yeah, definitely check out our groups for parents website. Um, we do have some virtual programming in the works for parents, so I'm really excited for that. I think that question may have stumped me a little bit because I think in my situation, I didn't actually. Um, I was in such a rough place that I kind of was on board for whatever would help me at that point because I was suicidal and I was definitely really depressed on top of the OCD. So I definitely think I was in a situation where I was almost begging to go to treatment, not knowing how hard ERP was. Didn't really want to go back after the first time, but I think definitely just having that an open conversation with your child about treatment and doing your research through the ICDF, and then just listening and understanding that what they're scared of about treatment and why they don't think it's a good idea, and then trying to get them there. Oh, my mom decided they can contact her too. She'll listen and support any parent in need, and that's definitely true. She does love doing that, so definitely contact Carrie Smalley if you need help. Kayla, I totally see what you're saying about the advice on how to respond to a young individual under 26 years repeatedly saying to others about how long and horrible it is that they got a diagnosis so late. Um, they were diagnosed before 23 years, but I know you said you were diagnosed. It took you a while, but I think the biggest thing about everybody's OCD journey is it that I could say is it's different, and one person's pain isn't worse than the other person's pain. So you should absolutely be able to say that you're suffering as well, and that you getting a diagnosis late was so painful, and that but that doesn't mean you need to respond and say you're lucky that you got diagnosed before 26 years or whatever. So I mean, I think just recognizing their pain, and then letting them recognize your pain, right? We're all on this journey together, and I think I think 15 years is too long. I think 10 years is too long. We want diagnoses as soon as possible, and treatment as soon as possible. So I think not taking it as a as a frustration, or being afraid to diminish someone else's experience, but more so just connect with them and understand where they're at. They're on their journey, and try to connect with them on that. Love the support in this chat. You guys are all amazing. It makes me so happy to see such a community, and how much it's grown over the years. I've been working with the IOCDF for since I was 17 and 16, and I think just seeing the growth of this foundation is remarkable. And obviously I'm biased, but there really is no other organization like it, and that's just the fact. And there's no organization that cares about their community as much as the IOCDF does. And we hear you guys, and anything that anything you want to hear more about, we are open, and trying to make sure there's resources for everybody. Um, some other questions. How do you work on challenging compulsions regarding exercising? I am struggling with compulsions while working out, and the value of the concept of challenging compulsions. However, my compulsions are getting in the way of training and helping others to train. That's a really, really cool question, because that's actually what um, I actually have to deal with. And Grace just actually asked a similar question: how do I deal with OCD in my workplace, and how do I approach them? So I'll hit on the exercise one first. I think there's a line. So what we always talk about with anxiety in athletes is that, and our message with anxiety in athletes is that OCD does not help athletic performance. And a lot of times the misconception that athletes, started to say was that, all those extra reps and all that extra work and all that extra obsessing about their sport help them. In reality, it doesn't help them. And so really, really important to attack those compulsions regarding exercising. So for me, if I couldn't stop, going for runs, or if I would slowly, run less, or I would skip a day to throw my week off. things like that are going to go a long way, and are going to be really, really anxiety provoking. But exercising is so good for you, but too much of anything can be bad for you, right? And could have a negative effect. So there's a real connection with OCD and overtraining syndrome. And so we don't want to get to a place where our body is really shutting down because we're overtrained. So I think really attacking those challenging compulsions regarding exercising, and definitely reach out to myself. You can reach out on Instagram at Iron T Smalls, or you can reach out through email through the ICDF. I can definitely help you with understanding, the connection between exercise and athletics and OCD, and we'd love to talk more about coming up with more different ERP exercises for exercise, and how to kind of combat those, because it is really important. Michael, I'm so glad tuning into this made me feel less alone tonight. I being here made me feel less alone. Being here with you guys made me feel less alone tonight. So I really appreciate you guys all coming on. I know I'm not Ethan Smith, but it's amazing. It's amazing to see everybody, and I appreciate everybody's being here and asking such thoughtful questions, and offering so much support as a community. So Grace, as far as workplace, we had a really, really great young adult panel at the conference about workplace and OCD. And I've been in a few situations. One with the stigma of opening up in the workplace, and then actual OCD in the workplace. So what I do, someone said one Ethan is more than I can handle. God. I'm gonna make sure he knows you said that, Deirdre. So I think one, you're gonna hear me say it time and time again, is ERP. And I know, Grace, I gave you ideas for ERP for the gym. Now I'm gonna give you ideas for OCD ERP for the workplace. So definitely, obviously tougher to do in the workplace, right? Because there's always people around. But just like I did in school, when I was in high school, I did these things called classroom clearances. And so I would literally stay after school and with my therapist would practice going through the classroom and getting up from my chair OCD free, and resisting compulsions. And so similarly, I do obviously I work in a weight training facility. And so after my athletes are done training, and I stay late and I do 15 to 20 minutes of an exposure in the workplace that I was having trouble with. So that, I don't ever feel the need to hide my OCD to my athletes, because I think our vulnerability can be our greatest strength. And I think showing them that I deal with something that I'm pushing through helps them push more in what they do. So I think, and builds that line of trust with an athlete and a coach. So I think, I'm in a unique position in that sense, but definitely, thinking of exposures to do in the workplace, and just taking 10 to 15 minutes, going in early or leaving late, and doing an exposure can go a long way. I know for me, organization of the weight room was huge my first time here, being a head strength coach. And I just wanted the room a certain way. And, appearance is everything to me. And I think, in culture, what we are, what we allow. And I wanted to make sure that I could, present a clean weight room. But it got to the point where I was always picking up after people, and always making sure that everything was in its spot where it should be. And so my therapist, when I first got here, had me do an exposure where I would literally leave 3 things out, and then leave for the night, and then have to come back in the morning and clean it up. And so I would be stewing on this all night. Oh my God, there's a barbell on the floor in my weight room. I can't do this. And it took everything in my body not to like drive back to the facility and put the barbell away. But over time, that anxiety got less and less, just as ERP does. Moving to Austin would make you feel good. Moving to Austin sounds wonderful. I think we need to have another conference in Austin, Texas. That place was incredible. We got about 10 minutes left, guys. So definitely, if you have any more questions, ask away. I hope I have answered a ton, but I definitely am down to answer more. So please, definitely ask away. And the sign on the wall behind me says, "Success is more attitude than aptitude." Um, so yeah, I mean I got a couple signs. Um, yeah, no, I mean I got this one over here. Um, Faith, it does not make things easy; it makes them possible. And I always write quotes on my whiteboard, so um, big on quotes. I got one from The Lion King on my whiteboard in front of me. It says, "The past can hurt, but the way I see it, you can either run from it or learn from it." And it's from Rafiki. All my athletes always laugh. They're like, "Isn't that the monkey in Lion King?" And I say, "Yeah, he's a wise monkey." I totally agree, Phyllis. You can definitely be more of an advocate. You know, advocacy comes in all sizes, and all shapes and forms. You have right, like you just said, like you have your own unique story. I always say our journeys are so unique to us, and we're, you know, God made us custom made, right? And you know, we weren't born to fit into a society. We were born to stand out. And I think you have your unique story that I think could really be beneficial for people that, especially, you know, you said I never lived anywhere with an OCD trained therapist. I think that's a great story that you did your own ERP from your own books and with your wife helping you as a coach. So I think you definitely have your own story that you could definitely tell. I think the world needs more of that. The people that can't, you know, access treatment and stuff, and how they conquered their OCD and how they dealt with it. So I think please become an advocate on all levels. I appreciate Kayla. I appreciate your questions tonight, and I promise you we are really, you know, the gaps that you mentioned are totally true, and I totally agree on. I think all three gaps that you named are three that I started out with as well, and things that we're really pushing for. So if you know if you'd like to get more involved, definitely reach out, and we're really pushing for all three of those things, and you know I really think we're going to get there, and it's a slow process, but you know we've come from such a small place and have made things so big now, and I think you know it's really getting there, and the way we're moving is in the direction we're moving is really encouraging. That's a really good question, Michael. Do I ever worry about not having OCD? Yeah. I actually there was a something popped in my head recently, like where like 2 months ago, you know, I go to therapy, you know, pretty frequently, but I felt that like I wasn't having as many obsessions or compulsions, and I was like almost obsessing about not having an obsession, if that makes any sense. So I definitely worry about it. Um, but then the obsessions came back and I said, okay, yeah, I have OCD. So, you know, they're never gone. And then I realized that, you know, they're there all day, but that's a real thing. You know, I actually went to a conference panel obsessed about not having OCD, and it's a common obsession. So that's definitely something that a lot of people deal with, because after um, after treatment, you feel so different, and you're worried that you're kind of. I almost felt like I was lying about OCD because I was doing better, but like I still have OCD. And then it humbles you really quick, and you have a rough day, and you're like, okay, there it is. But it doesn't mean that it's not worth fighting. The life isn't worth fighting for. And just like Liz says, I mean, we're definitely we're thriving. We're trying to thrive, not just survive. I think surviving and complacency with that, you know, is not okay. We want to be OCD free as much as possible. Great. So I'm going to write one of those quotes on my whiteboard tonight before I leave. That's a good one. Good last minute question. How do I deal with isolation? Katarina, that's a really, I hope I pronounced your name right, Katarina. That's a really, really good question. And with OCD comes a lot of isolation. I know, Michael was talking about it in the comments before, the post-conference blues, and I felt super, super isolated after I got back from the conference. You go to a place that's just so supportive and so connected, and then all of a sudden you're in a place that doesn't understand. And I felt so isolated. And so that's where I really rely on this community. You know, I feel like people think they're relying on me as a lead advocate, but I really rely on all of you and how amazing all of you are, because you're the ones that, make me not feel isolated. And so I encourage you guys to check out our support groups with the IOCDF. And it's a really, really great way to deal with isolation and find those allies that deal with OCD, because that's really, it's the best way to deal with isolation, is finding those people in your life that understand OCD and are there for you no matter what. I'm going to wrap up here in just a moment. I just want to make some announcements. Tomorrow, 12 p.m. 12 p.m. Eastern Time, 9 a.m. Pacific Time. Join Liz and Chris for the lunch and learn on the topic of perinatal OCD treatment. Going to be a really good one. Definitely tune into that. This is not the only live stream. Make sure you're checking out all of our live streams. You can see the entire schedule of the future streams at iocdf.org/peace of mind. You can also view recordings of past live streams on the YouTube channel, youtube.com/iocdf. Remember to like and subscribe to get notified when live streams are scheduled too. So actually, we're not just looking for likes and subscriptions. It actually lets you get notified too, so you know when they're going to be scheduled. Follow our social media at IOCDF, and subscribe to YouTube, as I said. And as always, if you need more resources, visit iocdf.org. It's the amount of resources and support that we provide now is so extravagant and so huge. And so I definitely suggest you checking out the iocdf.org. Tiffany, I'm so sorry you're just joining and we're wrapping up, but definitely rewatch this stream. It'll be available for replay. And I'm really, really happy to have had everybody here with us tonight and asking such amazing questions. And thanks to Skyla behind the scenes for making it all happen. And as always, stay strong, keep fighting OCD, and we're all in this together. So make sure to reach out if you need anything. Thanks, everybody.